Next on KQED Newsroom, President Obama's plan to protect Americans from data breaches.
We want cyber criminals to feel the full force of American justice.
What it will take to stop cyber attacks. Plus, Kamala Harris is first, but she won't be alone. The battle to be California's next U.S. Senator. And the San Francisco Chronicle makes headlines and history, appointing its first female editor-in-chief. Her plans for the paper's future.
It's a complete evolution. We're trying new things.
Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Target, eBay, J.P. Morgan Chase, Sony Pictures. Those are just some of the companies attacked by hackers last year. In fact, 2014 was the worst year on record for cyber attacks. Thieves stole personal information on millions of people, and in the case of Sony at least, leaked damaging documents and copies of films. During his State of the Union address next week, President Obama will lay out plans to protect Americans from cyber attacks, proposals he previewed on Monday.
We're introducing new legislation to create a single, strong national standard so Americans know when their information has been stolen or misused.
And the White House has planned a cybersecurity summit at Stanford next month. Bay Area researchers and companies are at the forefront of efforts to combat hacking attacks. Joining us to discuss these efforts, Tom Pageler, Chief Security Officer for DocuSign, a company that allows businesses to sign and send documents securely. Kurt Stammberger, Senior Vice President of Market Development with Norse Corporation, which tracks cyber attacks in real time. And Aarti Shahani, NPR's tech correspondent. And Kurt Stammberger, I want to begin with you. Your company's website, Norse, there is a map showing live attacks as they happen. Let's take a look at it, and if you can describe to us what we're looking at here.
Right. What we're looking at here is a live map of attacks underway on the internet right now. We have a worldwide deployment of about 8 million sensors in 50 countries around the world that emulate about 3,000 different types of devices, everything from cash registers to ATM machines to medical devices. So we can deliver very fast intelligence to our customers about who's being attacked, where, and what types of devices are being targeted.
So, for example, if you see a lot of attacks on credit card companies, for example, then you can alert credit card companies that this is going on and you need to batten down the hatches.
Right, exactly. It's a little bit like a real-time internet weather report.
Okay. Tom, with DocuSign, how often are cyber attacks happening?
How often? I mean, every day. We're seeing something every day. But I think the thing is we're also getting more awareness around it. So people are seeing that this is happening and they're more willing to share. It used to be it would happen, you wanted to hide it, you don't want people to know. So companies are more willing to come out. And I think also employees, shareholders, stakeholders, they're starting to take more due diligence in making sure they kind of protect their data. People are more aware of it, which is a good thing. We're starting to see best practices and just securing some of the things that they need to.
You say these attacks are happening every day, and I just want to quote a study real fast because the numbers are rather startling. A PricewaterhouseCoopers study found that nearly 43 million cyber attack incidents last year, 48% increase over 2013, and that breaks down to more than 117,000 attacks coming every single day.
Well, it's also, I mean, think about it, we're becoming more and more digital, right? More devices are out there. There's more connection to the internet. More companies are going digital. Obviously, even my company, DocuSign, is a digital transaction management company that we compete with paper. We want things to be digital. So there's more attacks, more areas to go after, more things to use, more surface.
Yeah, that's what people would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
And I think that one thing to keep in mind, though, when we look at these kinds of numbers, is that the attacks are, tens upon thousands a day, could be more or less. I mean, the volume is extraordinary, but what we care about are the attacks that are successful, that actually penetrate into a system and take data.
Exactly.
Well, how worried should we be then? Because it seems like quite a few of them are penetrating systems.
I mean, it seems like we should be worried. If last year was an indicator.
I can tell you that absolutely we should be worried, because not only are the volume of attacks increasing, but the success rates of attacks are increasing. And these attacks wouldn't be happening if there weren't a lot of money behind it. So the fundamental nature of hacking has shifted in the past 20 years from someone showing technical prowess to one of their buddies to organized crime and nation states going after valuable assets that they can sell.
Right, like you're not just flexing for your geek friends, you're actually trying to make a living this way or build an underground business.
And to Aarti's point, though, I think you want to really look at the ones that matter, the ones that fraud's happening, because we don't want the white noise. There is something happening every day. There is stuff, and there are things that happen. But if you get data that doesn't really matter, we don't want to over-report. We want people diligent about it, but you want to care about the ones that actually matter. Like,
well, let's talk about something that does matter. I mean, it's easy to laugh it off, right, Sony, because a lot of gossipy stuff came on. But that was a big data breach, and I know that Norse has been working with the FBI on this issue. And you know, people have said, well, North Korea, but you're seeming to say that it's more of an insider job. What are you finding out about that?
Yeah, well, I can't comment in much depth because this is still an ongoing investigation with the FBI, and we're still cooperating with law enforcement officials. But still to this date, the data and the telemetry that we've been analyzing don't trace back to North Korea. In fact, the evidence that we see indicates that the initial intrusions and exfiltrations of the data happened as early as July, and that malware was all written in English. There were no Korean components in it.
And so that leads you to believe it was an insider.
Right. In fact, these I say that a lot of malware is kind of like a Roomba. It's like a little robot that kind of bounces around and runs into furniture and turns right and runs into something else and turns left. And when it picks up a piece of dirt, it collects it. The Sony malware was a lot more like a cruise missile. It had user credentials, digital certificates, server addresses pre-programmed into it. And those are things that you really can only get access to if you're an insider.
So what's the key takeaway then? I mean, from these data breaches, Sony, which people, like I said, had fun with. But, you've also got the case of Home Depot, where 56 million customers were affected. You have Target, where 40 million card numbers were stolen. I have to say, actually, on this point, when we look at the huge hacks that are now household names, I mean, if you're listening today, if you're watching today, you know Sony, you know Target, you know Home Depot, you probably got a call about your credit card numbers taken at some point. And that's where I think it's really interesting, the sort of the massive problem that we're facing now, and then what the public policy conversation around it is. And there seems to be, I don't know what you guys think, but I think disconnect.
I mean, I think what's really important here is you think about the Enron scandal, the financial crisis we had before. We came out with Sarbanes-Oxley. We really went after a big change. And you have Obama coming together and bringing the group together. Why don't we do that for cybersecurity? Why aren't CISOs reporting to the board? I report chief security officers or chief information security officer or chief risk officer. The person who's in charge, I report to the board of my company. There's transparency. And my CEO signs off every year exactly what we're doing in cybersecurity. We might not be perfect. Everybody can make mistakes, but at least the public, the company, all the stakeholders know exactly what we're doing. And I think Obama needs to push for something like that. We need something like Sarbanes-Oxley. Well, speaking of President Obama, he is taking a step in this direction. This week he announced new measures to prevent data breaches. Aarti, what are some of the key pillars, and do they go far enough? Yeah, I'd love to actually, there are several key pillars that have to do with information sharing and changing criminal justice code. One thing I really want to focus on, because I want us to be attuned when we hear it, Obama said consumers have a right to know within 30 days when their data is taken. Let them know in 30 days. That's consumer protection. We need consumer protection with all of these breaches happening. Now, I, as a consumer, that sounds good. If I get hacked, I have a right to know. And, you, Target or Home Depot or BB, the clothing store that got hacked that I shop at, I have a right to know. The thing, though, that when you start to talk to people that are really in the industry is that telling the consumer that their disposable credit card number has been taken doesn't really solve root problems. The root problem is, are companies investing in security infrastructure? Exactly. Are they looking for malicious code attacking their systems? Are they telling each other? It's a white Okay, sorry. Are they? It's a white noise problem, but I think there are mechanisms to share information. So we have the FSI-SAC, we have the ITI-SAC, which is an information sharing alliance that's protected by the government. But there's always the risk when you start communicating with other companies. And I think what he needs to do, and I did hear he was talking about this, is allow for companies to share information. So we can talk to each other, we feel comfortable, we can compare notes. But the concern you have is basically that he's missing the mark, it sounds to me. He's missing the mark on the 30 days, I think, because when is 30 days? Yeah, in 30 days, when does it start? In 30 days, your
credit card has already been sold 100 times over,
Or
your electronic
or the
health
white
record.
noise too. I mean, if I have to report, and let's just say law enforcement's involved, and they say, hey, we have an idea here, but we need you to not report yet. Am I allowed to do that? Maybe not. And when does 30 days start? When I suspect it, when I know it, when I confirm it, and then I'm gonna, as a company, if there's a 30-day, I'm not gonna take any chances. I'm just gonna
what is a
over-report.
consumer to do, though? Because I'll tell you what, a Pew Research poll finds that 91% of Americans say consumers have lost control over how their personal information is collected and used by companies. So what is a consumer to do? Yeah, like you said, okay, so a data breach happened, you're notified within 30 days. You have all these passwords already, you change them regularly, they're hard to remember, they're ineffective. Are there technologies out there
I feel like
that will help
right.
this problem?
I would say that on the consumer side, the Apple iCloud hack to me really illustrates the need for consumer responsibility. When you're putting your stuff on the cloud, nothing on the cloud is private. Keep that in mind. Pay attention to whether data is being encrypted. Use passwords that are actually strong. I use something called LastPass, which is a password manager. It costs like $20 a year. It gives me some crazy 52-digit, password that automatically puts into my browser. I don't have to remember
We
it.
should use another one called 1Password, but that's a really
We should move away
easy
from
place.
passwords, though. I mean, why are we using passwords? People use the same password over and over. You steal the password, and you get to multiple sites. We should be looking at things. We do two-factor authentication. It should be, I know who you are, I know your pattern, I know your phone, I can text you. We should be moving away from that type of
Though
stuff.
interestingly enough, I feel like one issue with this question of how to protect consumers is that you see a collision head-on between what politicians are talking about now, what Obama particularly is talking about right now, and what's best for consumers. So, for example, Obama and the Prime Minister of the UK were talking about having better access to data on the cloud or messages on WhatsApp and whatnot for terrorism investigations. So they want to be able to more easily get data that is interchanged between individuals. Meanwhile, companies like Apple and Google want to hard encrypt all of the data that's being stored and make it harder for law enforcement to access. So I think that we're actually going to see in this next year a real butting of heads between consumer protection and law enforcement.
And I want to ask you real quickly, though, to wrap up this segment, is it possible to keep up with the hackers, especially when a lot of it is coming from overseas? You've got some of the leaders in this space, China, Russia, Eastern Europe. Is it possible to stay ahead?
It's a treadmill, definitely, and at this point, the hackers are winning. They're ahead, and it's something that it's a problem that we're never going to solve completely.
But we can try to address
it's something that
I
we
think
can always get
and
better
the
at.
United Front will help. I think getting together and tackling it together, that's how we're going to do it, working
Yeah.
together.
And
Like
I'm-
your company, our
I'm going to
company's
have to leave it there.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks to all of you. Tom Pageler with DocuSign, also Aarti Shahani, NPR's tech correspondent, and Kurt Stammberger with Norse. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, coming up, an unprecedented move at the San Francisco Chronicle. But first, the race to replace U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer is on. This week, California Attorney General Kamala Harris became the first to throw her hat in the ring. Harris will not have to compete against Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, who surprised many by saying he would not run. But she could face a primary fight from other Democrats, including venture capitalist Tom Steyer, and Republicans who have long coveted Barbara Boxer's seat. Scott Shafer addresses the race ahead with reporter Marisa Lagos.
Marisa Lagos, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So what a week in politics in California. On Monday, Gavin Newsom says he's not running for Barbara Boxer's seat. And then the very next day, Kamala Harris says, I'm running, full speed ahead. What do you make of the way it unfolded, that sort of 1-2 punch this week?
Well, we had, I think in the political world, heard rumblings that they would be kind of sitting down to discuss both of their futures. They share a political consultant, they share the same donor and sort of political base. I wasn't that surprised. I think that those positions make sense for them to be pursuing. Gavin Newsom was an executive in San Francisco. He likes being the sort of star in the room. He likes being controversial. That's kind of what he's made his name on. I think Kamala Harris is a better fit for that sort of role too. And I think she probably sees it as a launching pad to even higher office.
Although there was also talk that they both wanted to be governor. And Newsom, coming out the way he did it preempt her? Did it force her hand in a way, do you think?
Maybe, but I would bet that she knew that was coming. I don't think she heard first on Facebook the way a lot of us did.
Do you think there was some kind of a deal? Because, there was a lot of speculation, as you suggested, that they would sit down and kind of work it out, divide up the kingdom. But they both sort of say, no, that's not what happened.
I mean, I think they're going to say that. I don't think they want the voters or the public to perceive that they think that either of them is a shoo-in for either race, because they're not. I mean, these are going to be very contested seats. But I am sure they had discussions, and whether or not somebody pushed somebody else, you know, who knows? But I had heard a few weeks ago that this might be the way it shook out.
So Kamala Harris is the first one in and surely will not be the last. There's talk, for example, that former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa is thinking about it. Tom Steyer, the billionaire environmentalist who's given money to candidates who support his position on climate change, also thinking of running. What do you think are the considerations for deciding whether or not to jump into this race?
Well, I mean, I think the Kamala Harris is hoping that her jumping in is going to be a huge consideration. Yeah, money is clearly a huge issue here. I've heard everything from $20 to $40 million as just an entry point to really be a player, which obviously makes someone like Tom Steyer sort of a natural fit.
He'll find that in his sofa, probably. Just pocket change.
And, you know, Antonio Villaraigosa has, you know, national connections and has done a lot of work with the Democratic Party nationally. So I think he also has sort of that ability at his fingertips. But, you know.
Let me just ask you a question about him, though, because he made his money in finance. He's gotten very involved in environmental issues. Can somebody like that, I mean, you know, there's the old saying that California politics is littered with rich people who ran for statewide office and lost. Al Checky is the classic example, who ran in 1998.
But we don't need to look back that far. I mean, Meg Whitman, Carly Fiorina.
Exactly.
So I think that that's something that Steyer's carefully considering. I mean, he definitely has waded in more slowly than I think some of those folks did. But I think that's why he's really putting those feelers out to see what does the Democratic base think, where's the support, because I don't think he wants to be another one of those. On that list, join that list. So, of course, you have to say, and both party leaders are saying that this is a tough race, even though it's 2 years down the road, for a Republican to win. Nonetheless, there will be Republicans in this race. There's talk about Neil Kashkari, of course, who ran for governor. Millionaires who lost.
Right? Fresno Mayor Ashley Swearingen, also she ran and lost for controller. You know, what's at stake, do you think, for Republicans and the Republican Party in putting up someone who's credible? This should be a seat, theoretically, that they should be able to win, but it's tough.
It is tough, and I think it's also important for California that we don't have just a one-party race. I think the dynamic that we're going to be talking about a lot is the open primary system, and the fact that it could be very likely that there isn't a Republican in the November election.
And they'll just say what that is. It's the top two, where parties don't nominate a candidate anymore. It's the top two vote getters, regardless of party affiliation.
And so I think that's one thing that, you know, back to Kamala and Gavin, they were looking at, do we want to, you know, this could be a 2-year knockdown, drag-out race. So I think the Republican Party is going to be looking carefully, but there's a lot of schisms within that party in California, and I think that's why there's sort of this laundry list of folks with nobody really at this point rising to the top.
What has Kamala Harris done to say, hey, I'm ready to be U.S. Senator?
Yeah.
What's going to be her main talking point, if you will?
Well, clearly the law enforcement angle. I mean, she came up as a district attorney, first in Alameda, San Francisco. She's worked very hard over her first 4 years as Attorney General to really build relationships with law enforcement around the state who did not support her first run. The mortgage settlement that she and a handful of other attorneys general entered into nationally and really bucked the Obama administration on, I think is going to be huge for her. And I think she's going to talk about the sort of nitty-gritty stuff she's done in the AG's office to make it, bring it into the century on a technology level, to improve the crime labs, to assist in investigations. But I think that's a good question. I mean, she has a fairly narrow scope.
Yeah, and then just quickly, what do you think, what should California be looking for in a U.S. Senator? I mean, Barbara Boxer's been there since 1993. You know, what does it take?
Well, I think what you've seen with our two senators is very different approaches, right? Feinstein, I think, has been a little more middle of the road. Boxer's really been a lot about talking about things. She's been a progressive voice.
She's an advocate.
She's an advocate. And I think that's likely if somebody like Kamala Harris wins the seat, we'll see that continue. But I think, yeah, the scope of experience is important. I think their ability to connect with other people within both their party and across the aisle is going to be important. So those sorts of, you know, abilities to really navigate what's going to be a very different world in D.C. than in California.
And of course, the ability to either raise or write a check for $30, $40, $50 million.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the entry level point, really.
Yeah. Well, Marisa Lagos, thanks very much, and I don't want to let you go before I say welcome, because today is your last day with the San Francisco Chronicle. You're going to be joining us here at KQED covering California politics and government. So I'll be able to call you a colleague in just a few hours.
I'm very excited. Thank you for having me, and we'll be talking more, I'm sure, about this race and many others.
No doubt. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Scott.
And speaking of the San Francisco Chronicle, the paper made some news of its own this week when it appointed Audrey Cooper as editor-in-chief. She's the first woman to hold the position in the paper's 150-year history. Cooper joins the Chronicle 9 years ago as an assistant Metro editor and has been rising up through the ranks ever since. She takes on her new role as the newspaper industry struggles to redefine itself in the new media landscape. Audrey Cooper is here now, and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your new post.
Thank you.
You're taking on this job during a time of great disruption in the newspaper industry. What are the biggest challenges the Chronicle is facing?
I think our biggest challenge is probably our need to reach new readers. We have a very loyal readership in the Bay Area right now, but like everybody, if we want to grow, we're going to have to get people who are just coming into their civic consciousness, who just now want to, know about their community and do something about it. So really, it's reaching those people and telling them why we're the best source of news for them.
And how will you do that?
I think you have to do it in a lot of different ways. Once upon a time, we could just deliver a newspaper to everybody's doorsteps. We can't do that anymore. We have to reach them through email, through their phone, through whatever device they want to read it on, and we have to make really clear what is differentiating us.
Many of your paper's offerings, from sports to entertainment, weather, even politics, are easily found in other multiple online sources. Given that, why do you think people should read the Chronicle?
Well, we have the largest newsroom between the Tehachapi Mountains and Seattle. I don't think we do a very good job of explaining that to people. We have more people covering the news than any other media outlet. And I think that's really important because there's power in numbers. We have that influence to demand answers from people in power and to demand answers even from, movie stars and movie makers to sports figures too. So we really can be more definitive than others.
So what will you do? What will the changes be? What can we expect under you to make that happen?
Well, we've already started taking a really hard look at what we do. This last year, we've totally redefined our business coverage. We added a bunch of new talent to our staff and gave a really hard look at, with everything that's happening in the Bay Area with tech, how do we do the best job of really putting a critical eye on that? To explain the benefits of the tech boom, but also to say what's not so great about it so that we can have a civic conversation about it. The other thing that I think is absolutely critical is we really need to reinvest in our investigative resources. I mean, I don't know about you, but I became a journalist to speak truth to power, and we do that through our investigative journalism. So that's something that you're going to see from us starting this weekend.
The Chronicle hasn't made money in years. In fact, the whole newspaper industry is struggling right now to survive. What will you do to keep the Chronicle afloat?
Well, actually, I'd correct you right there. In the last 2 years, we have been solidly profitable. So we are making money, and that's a really good place for us to be right now. We're projected to make more this year than we did last year. So I'm really very bullish on it. I think, there were some dark times, and we're getting through them. And, part of it is to talk to people about what we're doing, how we do it, why it's better than everybody else so that they see value. We also need the support of our community like everybody. So we want people to consume the journalism and, if they consume a lot of it, to pay for it.
There's a lot of talk about digital models, and I know that you say the paper is making money. It's still operating in a tough economic environment. Print ad revenues are down more than 50% in just the past 5 years. Is there any thought of perhaps cutting back on the number of days that you have an actual printed paper, or eventually maybe going to an all-digital model?
I mean, you can never say what's going to happen, but we will continue to print the paper as long as people want it. I don't know how long that will be. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say at some point there will be no such thing as a printed Monday through Friday newspaper anywhere in the United States. I think we're pretty far away from that. You know, the word that I started to use recently that I never really had to in journalism school was diversified revenue streams. And that means, you know, we have events around our news coverage. We have an iPad app. We have other apps. We have to have a lot of different ways to make money in this business right now.
A lot of people think sfgate.com is your paper's website, but in fact, it's not completely true. It's operated by the Hearst Corporation, your parent company. sfchronicle.com is your website, and it has a paywall. How can your newspaper site compete when SFGate is clearly so dominant? It gets something like 24 million people globally a month.
Well, SF Chronicle has two websites. The newspaper, the people in 901 Mission do produce SF Gate. It is our free website. It's primarily breaking news, and also, you know, it's a place to go to get the temperature of the city. You know, the snacky stuff, the news that you don't have to spend 30 minutes digesting. sfchronicle.com is where we put what I call the journalism with a capital J. And you're right, we've done a really good job over the last 20 years since we started SF Gate of thoroughly confusing everybody. And I'll just to say that we need to do a really good job of explaining to people if they want the best news, then that's sfchronicle.com.
Would you consider dropping the paywall to get more people?
Well, I think you'll see in the next couple of weeks some really interesting things happen there. I can definitely tell everybody that we're going to start a free trial, so it will be, you know, a form of dropping the paywall. And we're going to experiment with a lot of things. I mean, we only started the site 2 years ago. It's a complete evolution. We're trying new things, and, you know, the industry hasn't been very good at trying things and abandoning them when they don't work or tweaking them when they don't work. I don't see any reason why we should be afraid to change things.
And just real quickly, I have to ask you about Willie Brown. He's the columnist for the Chronicle, and until this month, he was a registered lobbyist with the city of San Francisco. Are you concerned at all by the ethical issues that raises?
I would say yes, but I'm confident in our editors that we put Willie's column really through the ringer. He probably gets more editors' calls than anybody else on staff just to make sure that we're being ethically sound. I mean, I think our readers, he's extremely popular, and I think our readers know Willie Brown is still a politician, but he is the closest thing we have to a current day Herb Cain, and he's extremely popular.
Sounds to me like you're planning to keep him then.
Yes, I don't think we're going to have a lot of changes there.
All right. Well, congratulations again.
Thank
and you started during a great week. You also get to go to a birthday party.
That's right.
The Chronicle actually turns 150 years old today.
That's right. We're going to have some champagne and cake in the newsroom later today.
Good way to start your new job. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
And for more of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good night.